Evolutionary.org, Hardcore 2.0, episode 81 coming your way. Today we're talking about quality injectables, PharmaQo Labs. And Mobster and I are going to go over this. So we're going to go over some cool stuff in this episode. We're going to talk about what makes a quality injectable. A lot of people are under the impression when it comes to injectables that, they're just, you just take the steroid, mix it with the oil, boom, you're good to go in the vial. And that's it. They don't understand that there's other stuff that determines the quality, and how often we've seen over the years poor quality injectables that have been shown to be not what they state. It might be only be 20% or 40% or 60% of the actual steroid, and 40 or 50, 60% of something completely else or another steroid. So we'll talk about that. We're going to talk about some unique PharmaQo injectables. They have some really interesting orals, typically, that people would use in the oral form that you wouldn't think would even be an injectable form. So we're going to talk about those. And I know that some of my clients, they have friends and themselves, there's been a demand for this stuff. And they're one of the more popular selling things out there because people don't want to take orals. They want to take an oral steroid typically, but they want to take it in injectable form. So that kind of is cool because it flies in the face of, oh, you can't run oral only. Well, okay, then we'll run this injectable here. Then we're going to talk about standard PharmaQo injectables, and then we're going to talk about why we trust PharmaQo. If you've ever used PharmaQo before, this is a great opportunity to try their stuff. And we're going to tell you they have a really, really unique bunch of products. And according to their website, and if you go and you check out all their products, on their popular resellers, you'll see it's legit. They say they have about 1,000 products, and I believe it. So they have a lot of different options, really anything you could possibly imagine. So we're gonna go over as much as we can in this podcast, and we're gonna start off. But I'll bring in Mobster first. Why don't you touch on quality injectables, Mobster? Tell us what makes a quality injectable.
Yeah, Steve. I mean, you and I have had shows where we've discussed the stuff that we've seen online in terms of preparation. And even more recently, I've commented on just silly little things that we occasionally see just in terms of presentation. But let's start with product first and presentation second. So, like Steve said, we know of labs that have been absolutely amazing to begin with high quality, even overdosed, and then slowly, literally, sometimes within a year, the quality drops off in terms of it starts off being overdosed because why the hell not? And we want to put a good product out there, and we want great customers, and then before you know it, as Steve said, it's barely got any active ingredient in there whatsoever. Or if it's one of the more expensive raws, they use a cheaper raw because they don't give a fuck, and because they've got lazy or they've got greedy. So this happens. And it's happened to sources that people have thought were absolutely amazing. Now, as we've said on other shows, over time, in order to stick around, and then when you start to talk about fellow PED users or with fellow PED users, you start to get the same names come up again and again and again. Okay. So I can think of one Thailand based company where there's a variation on the name used by three different companies now. So there's all bits and pieces in this particular regard. I mean, just for example, Steve, I know we touched on this on another show. If you use anything but grapeseed oil now, you're kind of being lazy or cheap, right? Pretty much. We've heard of labs, again, stupidly bad, Steve, peanut oil, probably the most allergic stuff that I would ever possibly want to inject. Uh, People that have made, I mean, it's just a tiny deviation. Most oils contain a very small amount, minute amount, in fact, of benzoyl alcohol for a couple of reasons, mostly to do with making sure there's no bacterial issues. Again, just it's a little tiny bit with the oil can help with injecting and so on and so forth. We've seen, for example, great improvements with high dose products. I used to be a big no, don't bother with anything that's 350 milligrams or above. And yet, as we said on another more recent show, all of the companies that we talk about, including PharmaQo, have just got that much better at producing a smoother, nicer, better quality product. Again, back in the day, Steve, you never saw, unless literally someone put their own hand in their pocket, you never saw certificates of analysis. You never saw that kind of quality. And this is just on pure products. Okay. So you literally, if for example, Steve, companies that we could talk about where they get their raws from China, but they don't test the raw when it arrives. So they're trusting the Chinese to send them the right product. And they should really be testing the product themselves to make sure that they're not getting ripped off. And then they should make a great product, and so on and so forth. So there's all these kind of things that go on. And eventually you end up with, and this is pretty much how any company gets a great reputation. If I buy a motor oil for a car, if I buy a soft drink that I like, and I trust the brand, then I want the same great quality every single time. Now, when it comes to PDs, I want as much as I possibly can. One of those controllable variables, I want the PD to do everything that it should do. If I take VAR, I want to get strong. If I take debug, I want to get big, and so on. I don't want to use any product that batch 1 was great, no issues with PIP, batch 2, issues with PIP. You start to see this, not just with me, because I'm a variable, you're a variable, the next customer's a variable. But when we start to see great quality all the time, the company builds up a great reputation. And because we're using performance enhancing drugs, because we're talking about steroids, there's an almost natural, especially against people that are new to a company, new to a brand, new to a product, almost a reticence, Steve, where they go, can I trust him? Does it do what it's supposed to do? Yeah, mate, you might not be training hard enough. Your nutrition might be rubbish, and so on and so forth. But they're the same. We assume that those variables are covered. So when we're partnering with our cash, when we're putting out anywhere between $500 and $1,000, typically, that'd be less, especially if there's sales on. But 500 to 1,000 seems to be about the average that your special, the domestic market, the American market, will spend, even if some of that product is left over for the next cycle. That's typically what we see most orders there or thereabout. If you're parting with that kind of money, if I'm parting with that kind of money, $500 is the best part of £400. I want to know that my money's gone on something solid. It doesn't matter if it's a TV or a part for a car or a weekend away, Steve. I want to know that I'm getting value for money. I want to know that I'm getting what I ordered, that there's not going to be an issue. So all those things, everything. And that's just the source, that's the product, and so on and so forth. And then, like I said, there are the variables, there's the outside stuff. Let me give you another couple of examples. So let's assume that we've covered every single thing that's inside the vial, inside the pill sachet. Outside presentation matters as well. I've discussed on other shows how sections, and we've seen this back in the day, but sections even now, bless them, of the Australian market, they can have great product that looks borderline amateurish because they're not getting the labels in. They're not able to produce the labels in Australia or get them into the country for them to put on their product. So they can have an amazing product with a label that looks like it's been done on a child's ink printed kit. One of the kind of stuff you give kids when they're under 10 or 12 years of age. Or they're using a home printer. I've literally seen, and not on the Australian market, what appears to be photostated labels on supplements on eBay for big name UK brands back in the day. Now, if I'm going to buy a PED, if I'm going to buy, let's not muck around, Steve, an injectable steroid, something I'm going to put in my body, a form of medication, then I want the product to look like what it is. I want the product to look great. I want the labels to have holograms. I want the labels to have great batch numbers, stuff I can check. I want to see online certificates of analysis. I literally want the product to appear to or be as best and close as possibly can at the appearance of exactly the same stuff that I would go to a pharmacy or a chemist in this country and buy over the counter. I want inserts if I can have them. I want holograms. I want those scannable codes on them. I want all of these kind of things. I want the label. If it is a label, as often as not, I want to be able to peel it off and see the information underneath. All this kind of stuff. It doesn't matter if it's a sachet. It doesn't matter if it's a vial. It doesn't matter if it's an amp. It doesn't matter if it's a peptide or an injectable or oral. Every single one of those things must look and feel professional. I don't want pills that crumble the moment I open the sachet. I never, ever want to see a floater. So all of these kind of things and all that kind of stuff. Listen, Steve, it would be the example, say, of an orange juice in the supermarket. I don't care which shop you go to. If it had a child's type label, if there were bits floating around in it that shouldn't be there, tell me, you're not going to buy it. You're going to put that to one side and you're going to pay an extra $1, $2 for a quality product, stuff that's fresh, stuff that smells nice, stuff that tastes nice, but it's got to look, the label's got to have a use by all of these kind of things. And that's exactly what we want and what we should get now from a company that's providing us with PEDs. Absolutely. And yet we can still find examples of where that's not true. We can still go online and look at this stuff. And historically, we can definitely go back just a few years, 10 years, 15 years. And the horror, it's like that life in the movie, Steve, honestly. The horror. Literally, I think one photograph, Steve, back in the day, had an injectable oil where it wasn't just crystallized, there was a fucking insect wing floating in there. Guys complain now because they've used a too big of a gauge of a needle about the little bits of the rubber bung floating in it. And even then, if you use a standard sized needle, the rubber bung shouldn't degrade. The crimped part where it's kept up the rubber bung onto the top, the plastic cap should sit dead square, all of those kind of things. There is literally no excuse now, not in this day and age, not to be able to buy a solid product. So these are 100% all of those things. And like I said, I mean, the bottom line still is going to be, even if you don't care about the lid or the label or whatever, quality has to come down to no bacterial infections, an oil that is smooth when it goes in, that doesn't cause you any issues, regardless of how many milligrams per mil, and ultimately something that is dosed exactly right, so that variable is covered. And then it's just down to you, whether you gain, you get stronger, you get leaner, the work that you put in the gym, the work you put at the table with a knife and fork, everything else is down to you. So as long as those things are right, you're good to go. But if everything else is right as well, then you know that you've got a great source, a great injectable. What do you think on that, Steve?
Yeah, and at the end of the day, if you're not, going to use quality gear, then you might as well just quit. Don't even bother. In this day and age, we've come a long way when it comes to what we have access to. Gone are the days where you had to buy gear, from a shady black market, salesman back of the gym in a white van selling gear to the
Yeah.
meatheads. We're gone. We're gone from those times. So today you got to step your game up, and we're gone from the times of injecting gear that's 60% what it says, or you're not sure what it really is, but you know what? You're going to inject it anyway because, hey, I got no choice. Let me take this chance. We're gone for those days. We don't have to do that anymore. And that's what makes a quality injectable, being confident in what you're taking, knowing what you're taking. If I'm injecting 200 milligrams of Primo, I know it's 99% quality Primo. If
Yeah.
I'm injecting testosterone, I know that I don't have to waste money going and getting blood work because I know it's quality. So once you get that quality and you've got that confident quality, that's what PharmaQo offers. If you got that quality, then that basically makes you rest assured. So you're not spending most of your cycle stressed out. Like, am I taking what I say I'm taking, or am I just going to be a guinea pig on the cycle? So those days are gone. I can remember those days when I first got into the game. You'd have to order gear from overseas off some shady websites, and just getting the gear. If you got the gear, I mean, that was step one. That was like Christmas, getting the gear. Because a lot of times you wouldn't even get the gear. They just steal your money. You'd send some goofball, a Western Union back in those days, and hope that they sent you the product. And if they didn't send you their product, there's nothing you could do. What are you going to do? Fly overseas to chase them down, to get your money back? So you'd have to take that chance. There wasn't websites that had reviews. There wasn't customers posting
Yeah.
their
Own
lab
sense.
results.
Yeah.
So back then, it was very, very hard. So you have it much better today with companies and brands like PharmaQo, where you're getting quality, and that's the confidence. To
Yes.
me, if you ask the question, what makes a quality injectable? Confidence. The taking that injectable, injecting it, and having that confidence that I know what I'm taking, and I know I'm going to
Yeah.
get results on this, and I know this stuff is legit, and I know that if I were to spend money on blood work, that the blood work would confirm that. If I was to send it off to get tested and waste money getting this stuff tested, I know it's going to be legit, so I don't have to waste
No,
my money.
exactly. Let me
That's the
touch
whole
on that,
point.
Steve, just for a second. Sorry. One of the things that we don't see much of anymore, I just literally posted a reply in regards to this very subject just a few minutes before we did the show, where someone was asking about raws in the UK, and I'd actually talked about approved sources. My response said, why people still produce their own product? There's no need, because literally the companies that we talk about, including PharmaQo, because of the quality of the product, because as Steve said, that we have the trust there, that we don't have to, if we want, we still can, we can still go and get it tested. If we want, we can still get bloods done to see that the product's legit. That's one way that people do it, because it's cheaper than a product test. But the actual product test is cheaper now than it used to be. Dollar for dollar, it's cheaper now than it's ever been to go off and get a product, literally a sample of a product. You send off $35, $40 worth of steroid, and it costs you a couple of $100, maybe less if you do other steroids at the same time, other products at the same time for testing, and it's coming back within 90, 95%, 99% accuracy. And that's a lab test, independent certified lab test from a company that tests, or a lab that tests for all different kind of companies all the way across the world. As an example, again, Steve, you and I could be biased. We could have a specific bias for PharmaQo. They bunged us $500 to talk shit. So what I quite often say to people is, don't take my word for it. If you see a source like PharmaQo mentioned again and again and again, not just on our family forums, not just by Stevesmi and myself, but everywhere. I mean, I joke, I'm going to say Reddit or one of the other well-known falling down through the plug hole as they are now, super, super massive forums back in the day. And it'll be mentioned multiple sources with their own bias, with their own test, with their own response and results and whatever else, right? So that's one. And the other one, like I said, is it's getting rarer and rarer and rarer to see people homebrew. Buy the raws, buy the oils, put this stuff together just for their own peace of mind. Why is it getting rarer? Because quality product is that much easier to find now than it was a few years ago. And in fact, even the argument, the idea, if you're homebrewing, well, I'm going to homebrew a specific blend that suits my particular target, is become negated. We will discuss, as we will today, companies that are and blends and products that are almost identical to every kind of common cycle combination that you might think that a user could possibly use, and companies like PharmaQo have got you covered. There's almost no excuse. There's always going to be that tiny percentage that will do it, but it used to be a much bigger percentage. I would say, arguably, Steve, 10, 15 years ago, 30%, maybe a little bit less, maybe 25% of the US, aka the domestic market in the States, was people making product for themselves. The other 75% were literally, as Steve said, going across the border, buying from a foreign source, and fingers crossed it had turned up, or literally buying whatever the fuck was available out of the trunk at the back of the gym of some particular source or dealer or whatever you want to call it. Now, I would say, arguably, Steve, it's probably 90% that you go online, because there's almost a sort of a privacy argument there. Probably 8 or 9% are still buying from a gym source or my local dealer or my buddy or whatever else. And that's getting less and less and less all the time. 1 or 2% are still making their own product. But like I said, those numbers have changed because companies like PharmaQo are producing solid products that can be trusted, that has been tested, that has been independently tested by the customers themselves. And it saves you that aggravation, saves you having to mix this stuff up, saves you the risk of contamination, and so on and so forth. And then, like Steve said again, just on the review side, I've literally, we did a show the other day, and there was an actual, one of the very, very well-known review type companies that reviews TVs and stuff you buy on the high street and stuff you buy on Amazon and eBay and whatever else, also had a section for a particular company that we were talking about of PED products with 3.5 and 4 and 5 star reviews. So that's the way the market has gone, as it should, Steve. We're now getting to the stage, not just for the injectable side, not just for presentation, where people want the kind of level of service and cash back and returns and stuff that they're getting from Amazon. Why can't I have it in 5 days? Why am I getting a knock off the door? Why can't I use a Prime account? That kind of thing. That's a bit silly for PEDs, but it's just to give you an example of the level that we've got to when it comes to being able to buy a solid, trustworthy product that does exactly what it's supposed to. And literally, the only reason that cycle failed is because you didn't put the work in, you didn't eat clean. And that's kind of that puts the onus back on the person using the product and not on the companies, because the companies have upped their game. They've had to. They would not be getting the business that they're getting if they didn't put the work in that they now put in. And that's exactly what we like to see. And that's exactly the kind of stuff that we are seeing. And we're getting to more of that later on
Yeah.
with regards to how that works for a company like PharmaQo.
Yeah, so stick with PharmaQo. We'll get into PharmaQo a little bit more later in the show, but stick to PharmaQo and you know you're getting high quality injectables. That's really buy steroids from the back of the van of the guy with the neck tattoo and the big beard, you know, the back of your gym. There's always that guy that hangs out there with in the white van.
Hey,
Buy
I
the
resemble that, Steve.
by the dumpster. Yeah, if you get I gotta add bald as well. You don't have to. I don't think you have the neck tattoo though. But he's bald and
Shaving in the beard,
he's
no
got
tat.
like one of those nipple rings, you know, on his nipples. You buy
Yeah.
injectables from him. I'm sure you'll get good quality, you know, versus buying from
You want
PharmaQo.
some meth while you're at it? God help us. Yeah.
And he's got he's got all kinds of stuff for you to grab back there. But let's talk about some unique PharmaQo injectables, Mobster. So
Yes.
their website says they've got 1,000 different products, and it's really fascinating. If you look through the list, they've got everything, and we don't have possibly time to obviously go through every single thing they
No,
have.
no.
But in this one, we're going to talk about some unique injectables that you'd be interested in. And we talked about three in the pre-show that I found very fascinating because these are three that 99% of the time you're only going to find them as orals. And a lot of people say, well, you can't run oral steroids, an oral only cycle because, this will happen or that will happen. Okay. So you can run the oral as an injectable. Now they
Yeah.
can't say that anymore. So
No.
we talked about three. They've got a superdrol, a dianabol, and an oxydrol, which is anadrol, in injectable form. And I know for a fact, because I have clients that come to me, for consultations or whatnot. They have friends, and they've been very interested in these, and they've actually, I know for a fact, they've come on the forum, posted pictures of these on the forum as well. So these
Yeah.
are really popular. So let's go over the first one, Mobster. Superdrol 25 milligrams a milliliter, and this is just the right amount to put in per cc, 25 milligrams, because with Superdrol, even a 5 milligram difference per day can make a big difference. Like if I'm running 30 milligrams of Superdrol, I feel a lot more side effects than if I run 20 milligrams or 25 milligrams. So 5 milligrams. So this is great that they made it 25 milligrams. This shows you that PharmaQo knows their customers. They know their customers' demand because 25 milligrams is like the sweet spot. So because when I used it, 20 milligrams was just like tolerable, but it was like, I could go a little higher. And then 30 milligrams is like, whoa, this is too much. So they did 25 milligrams per cc. Perfect. They know their customers. They know what their customers want. And they put it at the perfect amount, 25 milligrams. So if you do 1 cc of this a day, that's what you would want. So with Superdrol, very, very strong. It's a very strong steroid. And over the years, a lot of people have used Superdrol because it used to be as designer steroids back in the day, or quote unquote pro hormones, but they were actually designer steroids that was Superdrol, and they would call it things like Bestrol or something else. So a lot of people over the years, you were able to actually go and buy this over the counter online with a credit card, as absurd as that is. But you can't do that anymore. So now if you want Superdrol, you need to actually buy the Superdrol. So this is cool that PharmaQo has a Superdrol option. And Superdrol is one of the most powerful steroids you could use. If you have 3 weeks or 4 weeks where you wanted to hit PRs, whether it be with strength or dry mass or anything like that, Superdrol will be the way to go. You get really rapid strength improvements on Superdrol, but to the point where you run the risk of getting injured because you're freaking getting stronger so fucking fast on this stuff. So basically, use caution when you're using it. It's still going to be very, very toxic in the body, even though it's an injectable. So you want to be aware of that. But this is a great option. And let's say you wanted to stack it with something else, you could stack it. But I don't recommend Superdrol be stacked. That's one of the things I'm gonna advise everyone out there. If you're gonna use Superdrol, use it by itself. You don't want to start stacking it because then the side effects and the toxicity are going to get really out of line. Mobster?
Yeah, I would also treat this in the same way. I mean, I've got a couple of thoughts here. Treating it in the same way that I would the oral, which means I would still use an organ protector. You're still going to have the same issues, even though arguably you're bypassing the oral, and this applies to all the oral options we're going to talk about here. You're bypassing that literal ingestion part, Steve, put it in your mouth, but you're still arguably going to have the same issues with regards to potential toxicity and impact on your liver and so on and so forth. So treat it in terms of using an organ protector or whatever else, the same as you would. Again, the reason why some people like this option as an injectable and certainly the next two options, probably the same as injectable, Steve, is there's an argument to be made. I can't see it for myself, but I know that other people will say yes. There's an argument to be made for using these normally oral steroids injectably because they like in their minds, and maybe it's a physical thing that I'm not seeing in terms of pre-workout. So, for example, Depot is fantastic, as we know. We're going to get into Depot momentarily for pumps. The Depot pump is better than the NFL pump, for example, in terms of the pleasure that you get out of it from the gym. So the idea might be for some people, and it might be a dietary thing, Steve. It might be a training thing. It might be that they're using low dose amounts of other products, etc., etc. Like Steve said, with regards to stacking. So the idea that they can take pre-workout, half hour, 45, 50 minutes before the gym, as well as whatever the hell else they do to get them a pump in the gym, something like an injectable, otherwise oral steroid, and have that enhancement just before they go for a gym and then have it at the gym. I can see the appeal there. And again, possibly also arguably your competing bodybuilders, your athletic users, etc., where the idea of getting something quickly into your system that does the job quickly and then quickly out, because relatively half-lives for the orals would be short, say compared to some injectables. I can see the understanding there. And I think ultimately it comes down to choice. Companies that produce this product, like PharmaQo, will be giving you the option. You have the option. You're not limited to half a dozen of the most popular steroids. We can do multiple forms and so on and so forth. So, for example, in the case of Superdrol, Steve just said 25 milligrams. Absolutely. Maybe twice a day, Steve, in this particular one. I agree with all the other things that Steve said in that particular regards. Let me touch on the D-Bowl, Steve. The D-Bowl, again, this is 50 milligrams. And I've actually said on previous shows 30 to 50 milligrams a day seems to be the sweet spot for me. I've run cycles, even now, even in the last few years, where 30 milligrams a day has been absolutely perfect. It's given me good results and so on and so forth. 50 milligrams has been the upper end where I've gone to it. I've never felt the need to do more. I do know, again, this is competing bodybuilders, where you might see 60, even 100 milligrams, but typically the higher dosages are rather shorter periods of time. Because again, there's the same arguable issue. And I think Debo would probably be the injectable oral version of choice, purely and simply, as I just discussed, quicker in, great pumps, and that potential argument. And also maybe a little bit less toxic than the Superdrol version and so on and so forth. What do you think on that, Steve?
I think you should do half a cc pre-workout, maybe like 2 hours before your workout with the Debo. That would be something you could do. And you could even use like a tiny slim pin and you could just inject it. You don't want to inject it in your stomach fat, but I would inject it like into a muscle, but it would be more shallow. That would be an option for you. And of course, you can use a 25 gauge as well. So that would be a really good idea, Mop. So you bring up a good idea there on the Depot. But that's cool that they offer it in injectable form. And I've seen over the years some underground labs offering Dianabol as injectables, and it's been quite popular. A lot of people just don't like taking orals because the orals will upset their stomach. They don't like, they rather just inject like and just be done with it, and not have to
I'll
deal
tell
with.
you something else, Steve. I think the only other issue would be that most of these orals have a relatively short, sorry, the injectable versions, including the orals, have a relatively short half-life. So I could see the pre-workout thing again, and then maybe post-workout later in the afternoon, I'd want to use an oral, purely and simply because I don't want to be pinning the same drug 2, 3 times a day. That's a little bit too much pinning per week for me. And again, maybe the pre-workout thing. I only train 4 times a week. So the option for me of taking an oral the rest of the time, but getting that quick boost in the morning, I can see where that appeals again. So again, if I was using, for example, the Debo, I would use typically, I would dose it 2 to 3 times a day as an oral, Twice a day would probably be the minimum, just because of the half-life. But I don't want to be pinning twice a day, 14 days, 14 times a week or whatever else. So that would not appeal to me. Those of you that are more comfortable with it, no problem. Slim pin, like Steve said, half a mil, more than half a mil. The slim pin's a lot easier on the body than the larger gauge pin, and so on and so forth. So that's just a bit of an insider tip there for you as well. What about the last one, Steve, in terms of the anadrol at 50
Yeah,
milligrams?
and Anadrol is one of the more popular ones that they have when it comes to being a quote unquote oral injectable option. And you get a nice dry bulking effect on this option here. So you could go with half a cc per day to give you 25 milligrams, or you could be aggressive. You can go ahead and with the full cc and get 50 milligrams instead. So it really is up to you. But that's cool that they're offering these. And it's one of those things where some of you, like I said, some of you just don't react well to orals. You get heartburn on them, you get upset stomach on them, your bowel movements get messed up on them, maybe dry stool, you get drier stool or more liquidy stool. So this injectable option is going to appeal to a lot of you who have very sensitive stomachs to these orals, and you're able to still enjoy these types of steroids. So that's really cool that PharmaQo has this offer. And again, it shows that they listen to their customers on what they want. And like I said, I know for a fact that these sell very well, that these are very good sellers. And it's because PharmaQo really, they kind of cornered a market on this, offering these options, because you won't find other brands that even offer this in the first place. All right, so let's talk about standard PharmaQo injectables. So Mobster, do you want to start us off with one or two and how you would use them that you like?
I'm going to jump right into something like Andrew Bolin 400, Steve. Again, you've heard me say on previous shows, although I have changed my mind, high dosage products might cause in some users post-injection pain, like what we call PIP. And previously, I was a no-no for me. Don't do that. The risk of a high dose per milligram product for post-injection pain is too high. It's going to be discomforting. You're going to end up coming online and saying, how can I deal with a post-injection pain, swelling, it's sore, etc., etc. That's no longer the case. So a product like this, Steve, where you can use, give me 2 seconds. Obviously, what we're looking at here, Steve, is Mastron enanthate, 100 milligrams per mil, Primo enanthate, 100 milligrams per mil, and testosterone enanthate, 200 milligrams a mil. And what did I say just a few minutes ago, Steve, about putting together a cycle the way that you would, and then producing a product for you that has exactly what you want in that particular product? So for me here, this is almost that perfect recomposition slash drying out type cycle, hardening type cycle. Again, making sure your diet's on point, don't get too high on the body fat. But they've put the product together for you, and just to give you a kind of option. We got loads of other injectables to get through. So let's have another one from you now, Steve, before I bring up another.
All right, so the next one we're going to talk about here is going to be Masteron itself, and they have a couple Masteron options. They have a 200 milligram milliliter and 100 milligram milliliter. Now, what's cool is that back in the day, you only had access to 100 milligrams of Masteron. That's really all that source has had. So it's really good that PharmaQo gives you both options. And Masteron's a very important steroid, especially today, because today, the trend is I want to be more cut, I want to be more hard, I want to have the beach body look, I want to look good with no shirt on, et cetera, et cetera. It's not like the 90s where we went through a bulking phase. Back in the 90s, I remember if you posted on the forum and you weighed under 200 pounds, guys would be like, oh, you shouldn't even use steroids, you're too skinny. I'm like, what the fuck? I'm 5'6". You want me to weigh 200 pounds? I mean, that's, you know what I'm saying? So how is that skinny? And then a guy will post a picture. He'd be like a ripped 175 pounds,
Yeah.
shredded 6%, and then he'd shut everyone up, So we've it's different today. So Masteron's a very important steroid. And when it comes to competition cycles,
Yes.
you're gonna be hard pressed to find a competition cycle that doesn't have Masteron in it. So Masteron is a
Absolutely.
very important steroid, and a lot of people like to use Masteron for more issues, even if you're not looking to get shredded or cut. A lot of
Yes.
people today like to use Masteron because they'll use it with an androlone. to help with side effects, and then they'll use it as well because it makes the entire cycle work good
Yes,
because it's
a lot of
so
those.
good
Yes, yes.
because it's so good at binding to SHBG. So the way I would run the Masteron in a cycle is if you want it to use it just for that purpose, like I just said, to help with the indolent side effects or help with, binding to SHBG, which will cause the entire cycle to work better. You can use it as low as 200 milligrams. So this
Yeah,
works good with the Masteron E 200 milligrams a milliliter because you only have to use 1 cc. But if you want to use it to cut and really harden up ahead of the beach or vacation or competition or whatever, then guys will run at 400, 500, even more. We've seen some of these professional cycles, and 99% of you don't have to worry about it, but I'm just stating this to be a factual.
yeah, yeah.
These guys will use the PharmaQo Masteron E or the Masteron Probe, and they'll run like a lot, like over 1,000 milligrams, and it will harden them up like you would not believe, where it'll make their muscles like rocks. So this is a great option for those of you who are looking to harden up. So it's really nice that PharmaCo gives you those two options. Mobster?
Let me just expand just for a few seconds on the whole competition cycle. And we do talk about these on our shows and how pros will use a product. You should learn from what they do and why they do it, but not necessarily mimic what they do because you aren't a pro. You're not trying to get in shape for stage and so on. And like Steve said, I was very much of the this is how a cycle should be run, etc. before. And then, of course, as Steve said when he was talking about the Masteron and he used that example, I'm not 6%. I don't weigh 175 pounds. So for me to argue with someone that's doing that is pointless, unless obviously I'm giving them advice on how to get even more out of what they're doing. If they are in shape, they have that result already. I don't have that physique. So therefore, my aim when I'm using a product shouldn't be the same as theirs. Same as it shouldn't be a competitive bodybuilders. It should be suited to what I want. So anyway, let's get on to the next one, Steve. Here. And I see these kind of products on multiple sources, and PharmaQo definitely has one. This is the Fast Rip 150 milligram. So testosterone propionate, 50 milligrams a mil, trenbolone acetate, 50 milligrams a mil, and drostanolone propionate, Masteron, 50 milligrams a mil. And again, I've used similar product to these. If you're diet at some point and if you're cardio at some point, this would work perfectly, even for me, Steve. And I know that for a fact because I've used a similar product. The simple fact of the matter is, and as I said just a few minutes ago, companies like PharmaQo will have these kind of products in their lineup because they know that there are users out there like myself who run a similar product that require something exactly like this. And I can tell you hand on heart, this mix, as is, Steve, will work for me absolutely perfectly because I've used something almost identical previously and in the past. So yeah, I recomped like a motherfucker on a very similar product. And I said it, how many times have I said it on shows we've done in the last couple of months? My belt size is still down. So yeah, for me, this would be absolutely great. Take that to the bank, Steve, in terms of whatever. How would I use this, Steve? I think I was using it about every second or third day. So some weeks it was just getting into the third injection. That was perfect for me. I think I was running ever so slightly higher. So it was roughly 2 mil at a time. Again, that was perfect for me. But obviously we would make sure that the dosing and the cycling is perfect for you. And that was how I run it. I'm not a high dose user, so take that to the bank if you want. If you are used to higher amounts, and especially if you can handle the trend better, maybe push it out to the equivalent of 3 mil 2 times, 3 times a week. Again, that would be pushing it for me. I was able to get by and get great success on my cycle using ever so slightly less, the equivalent of 4-6 mil a week. But for some other people, this particular product, the way that it's put together, pushing it out again every 3 days, every second day, every third day, so 3 times a week, and maybe out to the 2.5, 3 milligrams, 3 milliliters at a time, which would put you at the 450, a little bit, about 1.2, 1.3 grams a week total. And that would be a hard cycle for me, but there's a lot of users that are using a lot more than that. What do you think on that, Steve, before we move on to the next one?
Yeah, and this one is the flexibility is important. So when it comes to dosing, you can always change up the dosing on this because the esters are so short. So that's a good thing about it. Just a matter of what you can tolerate and what you're looking for when it comes to using it. But typically with trend, you never want to exceed 350 or 400 milligrams. And because the side effects will start getting brutal. So overall, you want to make sure that you're dosing it where the trend is staying below 400 milligrams per week total, and you should be good. So next one we're going to talk about here, and this one is one I know that Mobster that you really like, and this is the nandrolone options that they have. And why don't you touch on nandrolone? They have a Deca option, 300 milligrams, and they have a nandrolone phenylpropane option, 100 milligrams a milliliter. Why don't you touch on Deca? I know you've used it a lot.
I am an absolute fan of Deca. In fact, arguably, Steve, I wouldn't use the MPP version, although they have an option for you. The Nandro deck would be my go-to, the 300 milligrams a mil. Look, guys, anyone that's listened to any of these shows since I've been involved working with Stevesmi will know that I'm a huge fan of Deca and Sus run together. Nandro deck 300 milligrams, on point, Steve. How much would I use of this? Right now, and bearing in mind my most recent Sus and Deca cycle, last October, I'd probably use 1.5 mil of this a week, which is 450 milligrams. I was a little bit more on that my last cycle, went to 1,050 milligrams total. I'd probably go 50-50 and might favor the nandrolone over the decanate itself. Sorry, over the sustanon, purely and simply because the sustanon's got those mixture of esters. And again, it comes down to what I want from the cycle. You can obviously vary that yourself. So 50-50 for me, Steve, 1.5 mil twice a week is going to put me around 450 milligrams, 900 milligrams total. That'd probably be perfect for me. In fact, arguably, Steve, looking at this, the 300 milligrams, that's literally 2 mil a week. So, or it's 1.5 mil of each a week, 3 mil total. That's fantastic for me. It keeps things real sweet, real simple. And look, if there's a recommendation in terms of products being prepared for you, dosed exactly how you want it to be used, issues with side effects, I get none. In fact, the only side effect I'm going to have that I'm going to argue about, Steve, is that I get fucking huge, and going up and down stairs and carrying shit and whatever else is just hard work because I blow up like a motherfucker on it, which I like. It's fantastic for me in terms of strength, adding that extra bit of muscle, certainly adding huge size. My own, like I said, the October one, 336 pounds, over 150 kilograms body weight. I maxed out the gym scales. It literally went past. I'm making jokes about a bell ringing. The needle went past a last number that was registered on the scale. 24 stone in old money. So for me, and again, that was 1,050 milligrams. I've got slightly less because I don't need to be 340 pounds or 350 pounds. It does get a bit silly at some point, but my all-time absolute favorite cycle. In terms of the decanate part, the Nandro decanate, Steve, on cycle, what some people seem to like, but I always have to remind them it is only on cycle, is it does seem to help the joints. If Winstrol dries you out, Nandro decanate does the opposite and puts a little bit more fluid into the joint, certainly more fluid all over, but into the joint. So yeah, let's move on to another one, Steve, before we run out of time.
Yeah, so there's going to be three more that we're going to talk about on this, and they're going to be Primo, Testosterone, and Trend, and they have many different options of each. But what's cool about the Primo, I haven't seen this, Mobster, is they have with the Primo a 100 milligram a milliliter Primo option. They have a 175 milligram a milliliter option of Primobolan. And this is really cool because a lot of sources out there, they won't give you these types of options. So Primo is one of those steroids. It's not going to be a physique changer in a rapid amount of weight. But if you are a really good reactor, we've seen some guys run Primo and have really good results who have really good genetics and stuff, good muscle memory and all kinds of things like that. But it's one of those that it's a good one if you want nice, lean muscle mass, not many side effects. And this is an option. And the dosage of Primo, you can run anywhere from 300 at the minimum up to 500 or 600 milligrams. And some guys will even run it even higher. But it works really good. And the way I would run the Primo is I would run it that dose, a moderate dose, and I'd stack a little bit of testosterone with it. And that's just to give the cycle a little kick. So you can use the PharmaQo testosterone options that we're going to talk about shortly. And you can stack in 100, 150, maybe 200 milligrams. And that would be a nice cycle, 12 weeks. You get really good results, and the side effects would be very, very manageable. But that's one of the more popular ones that they have is these Primo options. And they give you the option. And you could save some money if you go with 175 milligram. That's what I would go with. because that
Yep.
cuts down on the injecting. So if you did 2 cc's of the 175, that'd be 300 milligrams a week. If you did three,
We're seeing Primo's making a comeback, Steve, as you and I discussed recently, and we were talked about the golden age and why Primo was used, and this is possibly why it's making a comeback. It holds on to muscle tissue, your hard-earned muscle tissue, while you're cutting down, while you're getting ready for the beach, while you're getting ready for stage or a modeling gig. So you're not losing, or you lose as little as possible of your hard-earned muscle, which is why it's become way more popular than it used to. I'll jump onto another one here, Steve, and a testosterone cypionate, 200 milligrams per milliliter. Listen, all right, now you could, as Steve and I have discussed on previous shows, you can run CRT with pretty much any PED or form of testosterone, especially the longer acting ones. Oh, you could run it with SUST, which is 4 esters. But it's probably the number one choice, and especially as this is dosed at 200 milligrams a mil, probably the number one choice. It's my choice for CRT. It's a perfectly dosed product, great for TRT. It's a long-acting ester. It's going to be in your system plenty of time. 1, maybe 2 jabs a month if you want to go as little as 100 milligrams a week. I would probably run this on a 3-on, 1-off on a monthly basis. So that would be 200 milligrams week 1, week 2, and week 3, and then off for week 4, and then repeat. And obviously get your blood tests, etc., etc. What do you think on that, Steve? Before we look at one more testosterone option.
yeah, well, let me talk about that. So PharmaQo, they have you covered no matter what testosterone you want. They have Test Sip, they have Test E, they have Test Probe, they have blends. So many different options when it comes to testosterone. They have even a suspension option, and the suspension option is called testosterone base. Testosterone AQ50 is what they call it. So this one basically you take it pre-workout, and it doesn't have an ester attached, so it's not going to be slow releasing. It's going to hit your body quick. So they have different options. And these are, look, at the end of the day, testosterone, a lot of people like to use testosterone as the base of their steroid cycle. They also have blends. One of the most popular blends that they have is, of course, what you mentioned earlier, Mobster, the Sustanon 250, which is going to be a blend of 4 different testosterones. And look, if you want to use testosterone solo, some people react really good to it. 500 milligrams a week would be the moderate dose. And really, that's all you need. If you want to stack in an oral, you can. You can kickstart the cycle. You can finish the cycle with an oral, or you can run an oral throughout the cycle. It really just depends on what you're looking for. A really good idea with testosterone, because it does aromatize, is you want to make sure you're using an AI. And of course, PharmaQo does have AI options. So Aromacin, Arimidex, those are your top 2 AI options. And those are the ones you want to go with. So really, really good. They also have a TRT formula, which would be good for those of you who want to optimize your testosterone replacement therapy. And this one is really, really cool because it comes in 200 milligram a milliliter, and it basically is going to be a testosterone cypionate. So you can inject this once a week, once every 10 days, once every 14 days, and you be able to switch away from using your expensive testosterone that you're getting from a doctor or anti-aging clinic. You can just switch to this. So they have so many different options when it comes to testosterone. You just got to check them out and see which one fits for you. So Mobster, why don't we finish off with some trenbolone? And again,
Yeah,
yeah,
I was looking at this, Steve. I like the fact that not only have they got the blends when it comes to trenbolone, they've got 3 different straight forms of trenbolone, Steve. I'll do it as it's listed: a trenbolone hexy, a trenbolone acetate, and a trenbolone enanthate. Now, listen, guys, we talk about trenbolone all the time. It's the bad boy in the corner of the room that everybody seems to love when it comes to injectable steroids. And one of the things that we always talk about is, listen, if you've never used Tren before, use a short-acting version first, just to see how you get on, quicker in, quicker out. But if you know what you're doing, if you know that you can cope with the side effects, if you're aware of the side effects, as we always make sure to give you that kind of advice, make sure you do your research on the side effects, especially when it comes to trenbolone, because some of you will hate it. I've used in that fat strip trenbolone mix, and I can feel the toxicity. I can feel that sort of kind of slightly out of sorts sensation of being on it. So for me, maybe I'd have to build up to a sort of level where I'd like it. And again, also my age thing would be now, but how many people that can cope with the trend side effects fucking love it? And they would love the options here. not just the free straight forms of trenbolone, but the fact that there are trenbolone blends, there are mixes of other products that are already sorted out for you. But yeah, the trenbolone hexy, Steve, 100 milligrams a mil, the trenbolone acetate, 100 milligrams a mil, and the trenbolone enanthate, 200 milligrams a mil. Now, listen, if I was going to use tren and I knew that I was okay with the side effects, I would probably be looking forward to trenbolone enanthate, Steve. Slightly longer acting, less injections per week. The lowest I think we see people run it would be the 200, probably 300 milligrams would be more typical. We have seen users, and we know a couple of users of tren that would be looking for 8 gram a week. And I think, again, what's something else that we've said, be very unusual not to see that. Like we were talking about the master earlier, very unusual not to see this in a competitive bodybuilders. Steve said, and I've agreed, the 90s, 2000s, when trenbolone kind of reared its head, was the change and transformation in a lot of on-stage, especially open class physiques. And that came down to tren. And I think the phrase that Steve's also did, and I've agreed with again, is you're almost giving something away when it comes to competing because everybody else on stage is going to be using tren. And if you're not, you're almost going to give something away. You really have to have amazing genetics, better than they have, and not be using tren to put that on stage and have that kind of stuff out there. Obviously, you don't have to run it long. How would you run it, Steve, just before we finish off?
So, I mean, typical dosage, 250 to 350 per week. Pros, of course, are going to run it much higher. So, but that's going to be the sweet spot. And I found no reason. I've run it a little higher than that. I found no reason to exceed that. So, and another thing when it comes to weeks, 8 weeks or less, I've had a really hard time running it more than 7 or 8 weeks. It has a lot of side effects and they build up as the cycle goes on. Tren is no joke. It's going to cause a lot of problems in the body, a lot of inflammation. So you don't want to run it too long, or you're going to run into some health problems. So it's one of those steroids. Save it for your till you're really ready. That's why we're mentioning it last. But PharmaQo, look, at the end of the day, they have excellent injectables. They have quality injectables. Products have been tested. Products have been approved. We trust them tremendously. So, Mobster, why don't you finish out the last few minutes talking about why you love PharmaQo so much? And I'll just end it, end my thoughts with, look, at the end of the day, I've used PharmaQo for about the past 3-4 years. I've used their products, and we're going to talk about more of their products on future shows. But I've used their orals. I've used their injectables. I'm sitting right here with PharmaQo products right next to me, Mobster. So that's how much I trust their products. And look, at the end of the day, you want quality. And we talk about on this podcast, the title is quality. That's an important word, because when it comes to steroid use, what you put in your body is quality. We go through all the trouble making sure we get quality food, quality supplements, quality water, quality air that we breathe. We make sure we don't put crap in our bodies. We make sure that we go to a quality gym. We do a lot of stuff. So it's a shame that you're not going to use quality testosterone, So that's what I'm going to say on that. And I'll let Mobster kind of finish out the show with his final thoughts.
So yeah, listen, guys, I know what makes a great lab. I know what makes a great source. I've discussed this on previous shows. Longevity, you want a company to be around for a long time. Quality. While Steve and I have been doing the show, we've been looking at the products and we've seen the lab test. We've seen the results. These are not in-house lab testing. This is out-house lab testing. We mentioned earlier in the show, users buying at their own cost. And I talked about the cost, their own labs. I've talked about how a product should look. I've talked about how a product should feel. All of these things apply to PharmaQo. Literally, guys, if you went to a chemist, if you went to a pharmacist and you saw these products on the shelf, you would go, that's exactly how a product should look. If you want a cycle put together by yourself and you buy the single source products, they got you covered. They've even got, and we'll discuss this on another show, Steve, it just caught my eye as we finish on the show, a female version of the Anavar dosed at exactly the same amount that a female user would use. This, hopefully, we'll talk about in a future show. This is exactly the kind of product that I'm looking at for. This is exactly the kind of company that I want to provide me with products. And that's exactly why we discuss these people today, because that's what they're like. And it's exactly, listen, guys, write a list of the things that you think a company should have, put it down on a piece of paper, look at it, and then go and tell me that PharmaQo doesn't fit those lists of things that you want, the qualities you want, the products you want, the dosages you want. And and again, being able to trust it, knowing that it's been tested, knowing that you can test it yourself and find it not wanting, is exactly the kind of stuff. And instead of, like Steve said earlier on, what you inject it into your body. That's it. None of this boot stuff made in a kitchen sink, sold out of the trunk of the back of a car. You don't have to do that anymore. As I've said on other shows, Steve, when it comes to companies like PharmaQo, you've never had it so good. Please note, we are not doctors and opinions are ours. It is our view based on our experience and views on the topic. A podcast for informational purposes and entertainment only. The freedom of speech and the First Amendment applies.